Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. On today's episode of Thinking in English, let's investigate the debate over school uniforms. Are uniforms a way to make schools safer and more equal? Or are uniforms stopping children from being individuals and have no effect on academic performances? Let's discuss this on today's episode. Head over to the Thinking in English blog for a full transcript of today's episode. And why not check out my Instagram page, Thinking in English Podcast, for more great English content. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast and also on my blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Peculiarity. Peculiarity. Something that is typical of one person, group, or thing. For example, farmers have to change approach to deal with the peculiarities of each crop. Uniform. Uniform. A uniform is a set of clothes that has to be worn by the members of the same organization or group of people. For example, the soldier wore full uniform on his wedding day. Sixth form. Sixth form. In Britain, sixth form is the part of a school for students aged 16 to 18. For example, when I was at sixth form, I studied maths, history, and politics. Regulated. Regulated. Controlled by rules or laws, such as we need to make sure banks are regulated so that they don't put people's savings in danger. Mandatory. Mandatory. Something that is mandatory must be done. For example, it is mandatory to wear seatbelts in cars. Intruder. Intruder. Someone who is in a place or situation where they are not wanted or not allowed. For instance, the intruders entered the house through the window. Distracted. Distracted. Having your attention taken away from what you should be doing. For example, she was distracted by her phone throughout the dinner. To enhance. To enhance. To improve in quality, amount, or strength of something, such as pictures can be enhanced using computer software. Expression. Expression. The act of saying what you think or showing how you feel using words or actions. For example, freedom of expression is considered a human right. Although almost everyone who listens to me is long past their school years, you have all been to school when you were younger. And some of you, or many of you, probably have children or even grandchildren who are currently school age. When you think about school, what do you remember? For me, I remember being bored in my high school French classes, realizing I was quite good at math, playing football every lunch with my friends, and going to the local shop to buy snacks in my final year of school. Some of you might have had similar memories to me, but most of you will have a very different school experience. Different countries, types of schools, generations, and education systems all have unique features and peculiarities. So, what do you remember? And more related to today's episode, what were you wearing? I had to wear a school uniform from the age of 4 until I was 16. And then my final 2 years at sixth form had no uniform requirements. And in the UK, this is very, very common. British schools have had uniforms for hundreds of years, and virtually all schools have a required uniform at some point. Usually, elementary schools require children to wear a school jumper or a sweater if you prefer American English, a polo shirt, and black grey trousers, shorts, or skirts. Secondary school students usually wear more formal clothes, such as a jacket, tie, and formal shirt. It is very rare to find a school with absolutely no uniform for all students, although many schools do allow sixth form students to wear their own clothes. But why do we wear uniforms? And should we still make students wear uniforms? The UK is not the only country with a uniform requirement. All over the world, children's uniforms are found in certain schools and countries. However, in other places, like the US, it is quite rare to find a school with a uniform. As some of my regular listeners will know, I used to be an elementary school and junior high school teacher in the Japanese countryside. And Japan has some of the strictest uniform rules in the world. The color of children's underwear is regulated, hairstyles and hair color is checked, and in many schools, the uniform doesn't change with the seasons. I will always remember teachers measuring girls' fringes or bangs in American English, the front of the hair, and they were measuring them with a ruler. And I will also always remember elementary school children looking so cold as they walked to school in their shorts and skirts. However, from next month, some Japanese schools, including 200 in Tokyo, are loosening some of their rules for the first time in many years. And around the world, there is a debate over whether school uniforms are actually necessary. Some people argue that uniforms make schools safer, more equal, and less distracting. Others argue that uniforms stop children from showing their creativity and individuality and don't actually affect behavior or academic achievement. So, in the rest of this episode, I'm going to introduce two different sides of the debate. Should students have to wear school uniforms? I want you to listen to the arguments I make and then decide yourself your own opinion. Think critically in English about what I say, and then let me know what you think. You can let me know on the Spotify. I'll leave a poll, or on the blog. I'll also leave a poll on the blog transcript, or just reach out to me on Instagram, I guess. You can also check out some of my other debate episodes. I've done quite a few. Oh, and one more thing. If you're listening to this podcast only and you're curious about my evidence or my sources, I'll try to leave hyperlinks in the blog article, which you can click on and see where I got my information. So, should students have to wear school uniforms? Let's start with the arguments in support of school uniforms. First, proponents of school uniforms argue that they can deter crime and make schools safer. Data from the US, a country known for not having uniforms, has shown that introducing uniforms reduces crime. For example, after Long Beach, California introduced mandatory uniforms for certain grades, reports of violence and crimes like weapon possession, drug possession, assault, and vandalism all decreased. Uniforms can make it harder for students to hide weapons on their bodies, makes intruders or outsiders obvious on school property, and help students keep track of help schools keep track of their students outside of the school. School uniforms also prevent students from displaying gang colors or signs, which is a real problem in some countries. Another argument proponents make is that school uniforms can make students more focused on their education. Rather than being distracted by clothes and what they are wearing, the fact that everyone has to wear the same thing removes that distraction. Personally, I remember always being stressed about what to wear on one of the 1 or 2 days a year the school allowed non-uniform. So in the UK, that's usually for charity. You pay £1 and you can wear your own clothes. So I can't imagine what it would be like every day. And evidence actually supports this. The University of Houston released a study showing that girls' language tests improved after uniforms were introduced. One of the major arguments in support of school uniforms is that uniforms not only help stop distractions, but also help stop peer pressure and bullying. There is no competition over who has the most expensive, most fashionable, or most desirable clothes. In many ways, uniforms are seen to hide the inequality between students. Moreover, it is possible that school uniforms can save parents money. Although they are expensive, rather than a number of different outfits, school uniforms are limited to one simple set of clothes. And estimates from the UK suggest that uniforms cost around £88 on average, including shoes and tie and jacket and shirt and trousers, while non school outfits are on average over £100. And finally, proponents of uniforms often argue that uniforms enhance school pride, unity, and spirit. Uniforms may help students feel part of a community and increase their care for the school and make children feel more important. They can also improve attendance and discipline. Now, let's look at the other side of the arguments against school uniforms. Opponents of school uniforms tend to argue that uniforms restrict students' freedom of expression. In some countries, such as the US, it is written in law that everyone has the right to freely express themselves. In Sweden, uniforms have been described as a human rights violation, as dress and appearance should be considered an individual expression decided by the students themselves. Similarly, school uniforms force students to conform and look similar, even if they want to be individual and express their own desire or personality. In recent years, this has been most obvious in the uniform requirements of transgender or gender non-conforming students, who might not feel comfortable wearing a male or female uniform. Wearing their own clothes with their own style removes that stress. Moreover, evidence does not necessarily suggest that school uniforms actually improve attendance, academic performance, or exam results. Some studies have found that uniforms have no significant effect on reading or mathematics grades, while other studies tend to see a negative reaction to uniforms. Although most proponents argue that school uniforms help stop bullying and violent attacks, opponents of school uniforms argue that this is not the case. While some schools did report improvements in behavior, other schools did not. For example, one Miami school district reported that fights in middle schools doubled 1 year after the introduction of mandatory uniforms. And finally, opponents of school uniforms contend that uniforms actually emphasize socioeconomic divisions. Uniforms cannot hide the difference between the poor and the rich, the haves and the have-nots. For example, richer students will have newer and more uniforms, while poorer students will often wear older or second-hand clothes. And uniforms are also an extra expense for parents to buy, which cannot be used in normal everyday life. So here is today's final thought. On this episode of Thinking in English, I have tried to introduce the debate over school uniforms. So, should students have to wear school uniforms? On the one hand, some people argue that uniforms make schools safer, more equal, and improve the quality of education. On the other hand, opponents of school uniforms argue that uniforms stop free expression and have no impact on education. What do you think? Should students have to wear school uniforms? And did you need to wear a school uniform when you were at school? Let me know in the comments on the Thinking in English blog. Let me know on Spotify. You can leave an answer to my question. And if you want to, send me a message on Instagram. I'm more than happy to hear your opinions over there as well. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate every single person who takes the time to listen to my podcast. Make sure you head over to the blog, thinkinginenglish.blog, so you can read the whole transcript of today's episode and look at some of the other content I upload onto the blog. You can also check out my Instagram page. I post very regularly, and if you want to message me, I always reply to people on Instagram. Please leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. Leave a rating on Spotify. You can do that now, and I'm trying to get to 150 ratings by the end of February. Please recommend to all of your friends and maybe share on social media. And why not go back and listen to a few of the old episodes? It's one of the best ways to support the podcast. You can also donate on the Thinking in English blog by going to the support page. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.